Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. My name is Eric Cartwright and I'm one of the members of the implementation team here at Acctivate. Today we're going to be discussing Microsoft queries and your Acctivate database. This is a topic that often comes up during the implementation. If you have information that you want to get out of your database and you currently do not have Crystal reports, or you do not know how to use Crystal reports, then Excel queries can be one method you can use. So today we're going to give you an introduction on how to get started. First, let's talk a little bit about what a Microsoft query is. Microsoft queries allow a user to connect an external data source, such as an Acctivate database, to another software application, such as Microsoft Excel. To do this, first you would want to select your external data source. Today I will be using my Acctivate database. Then select the data tables or views and/or fields that you want to display from them. The Microsoft query allows you to use filters and choose how you want to sort the records before you choose to export them to Excel. You have the option to choose to do this with an easy query wizard or in a non-wizard Microsoft query window. I will be demonstrating both of these. Excel queries allow the data to be viewed in real time since it is pulling directly from your Acctivate SQL database. If you want a snapshot in time and do not want the data to refresh, then you simply do not set the Excel file to refresh. On a live demo, I'm going to show you how to save the SQL password and set your refresh options in Excel. If the password is not saved in Excel, then you may be prompted to enter it each time. Then when the file is closed and reopened, you will have to re-input that password. You also have the option to have the file refresh each time it's opened or on a set schedule. I normally recommend refreshing the file on open and refreshing every 60 minutes. This keeps your data up to date. So with the option to refresh upon open or every 60 minutes, this allows the information you see in Excel to remain current even as you conduct business throughout the day inside of Acctivate. Microsoft queries are not limited to just Acctivate or SQL. Let's talk a little bit about why would you want to use a Microsoft query. Acctivate includes several standard reports which provide a lot of information that most of our customers want to see. However, you may have needs for information outside of our standard report list. So, if you do not have Crystal reports, this would be a reason that you would want to use Excel queries. Most of you probably already are aware that Acctivate is distributed with the free version of Crystal Reports Viewer, which allows you to preview and print reports out of Acctivate. However, you also know that trying to modify these reports, if you do not have the full version of Crystal, in addition to the fact that Crystal Reports is somewhat complicated. Custom ad hoc queries can be another way that you can use to provide users with the opportunity to create and design their own custom reports based on their individual needs for what they want to see at any time. So some possible uses for a custom query are sales order status reports, lot and serial number reports, purchase order reports, or purchase receipt reports. If you wanted to view the current inventory and availability or on-hand quantities for a specific product or group of products, or in various locations of the warehouse, and wanted to see that information quickly and easily in Excel, you can pull that information right from Acctivate. Another reason why a customer may find that they have a need to export the data to Excel is when they're in the process of making changes to product IDs, descriptions, product classes, product types, or even a product price list. Queries allow for an easy way to get your information into Excel to make changes before importing and updating the records back into Acctivate. Another reason that customers may want to use an Excel query is for the visibility of the data in Excel. Some customers just prefer to see the data displayed in Excel in an Excel spreadsheet, allowing them to easily sort and filter to get what they want out of the report without needing a custom Crystal report. Almost everyone online today probably has used Excel in some form or fashion and are probably more familiar with this functionality to customize the information in a spreadsheet. Microsoft queries also allow you to do that very easily. Microsoft queries and the files that they generate can be saved and used again and again or only as a single-use one-time query. A Microsoft query also prevents the need for users to rekey their information. So through the use of an ODBC database connection, a Microsoft query will allow your Office applications, such as Excel or Word, to use their built-in functionality to extract the data from the Acctivate database and return it right back into Excel or Word. If you print labels, you may also have some printing software. And if a label printing software has the ability to connect through an ODBC connection, you can also follow those same processes in your label printing software. An Excel query can pull the data directly into Excel without one or more of your employees spending time to rekey it and spending time cleaning it up after it's exported. Microsoft queries allow the user to select only the database views and fields they want to see and filter and sort that information before it's exported to Excel. One advantage to a Microsoft query is that the exported data is view only. Queries only sync the information in one direction, meaning you can export it out of Acctivate into Excel without being concerned that any changes you make to the file modifying your information in Acctivate. Any changes or modifications you do once in Excel will remain in Excel and will not update your Acctivate information. One of the most common methods for connecting to an Acctivate database is through what is called an ODBC database connection. If you have the shipping workstation and were involved during the setup, you may recall this as how your shipping software also connects to the Acctivate database. There are other ways that you can connect a Microsoft query, but I prefer to use an ODBC connection because I feel, for me, it's a little bit easier than some of the others. In Windows, there are two ODBC data source administrators, a 32-bit and a 64-bit variant. If you already set up the ODBC connection, but you do not see it listed, then most likely you had set up a 64-bit connection instead of the 32-bit. This happens sometimes on 64-bit machines. Simply put, a 64-bit Windows machine will typically default to a 64-bit connection, so you have to specifically choose the 32-bit administrator. The ODBC data source administrator can be found in the control panel and under the Administrative Tools section through the Windows icon and searching for ODBC or directly from Excel. I usually don't use this because sometimes it doesn't work. You should only have to set up the ODBC connection once. However, it must be set up for each person who wants to query the database on their machine. When establishing your ODBC connection, you must select the database that you want to pull the information from. Once a connection has been created, it can be modified to connect to a different company file. But if you have multiple Acctivate companies, I typically recommend each company have a separate data source connection so that you do not have to change that. Now, let's talk a little bit about the database, views, and tables. Acctivate is a relational database that contains both tables and views. Tables in Acctivate are designated with a prefix of TB. For example, the product table, you will see TB product. Tables contain the raw data for lists, items, and transactions. However, the tables also require links to other tables to obtain user-friendly fields. For example, the customer table may contain links to the salesperson table, but does not include the salesperson ID or name. Typically, the structure of a table can and often does change. This is why database tables are not recommended for reports and queries because of the change in structure and the addition or deletion of fields in a specific table. Database views, on the other hand, will typically contain more user-friendly information, and you can also see that the example of the view I have on screen does not include the TB as the prefix. So you can always tell whether you're looking at a database table or a database view. One thing worth noting is that even though the database table structure may change, the database view structure will almost always remain the same. We strive to keep the structure in the data views intact for backwards compatibility with custom reports and Excel queries that you have already created. This is why data views are always more appropriate for custom reports and Excel queries. So we strongly recommend that any custom Crystal report or Excel query use data views instead of tables. If you have any questions, please contact our support team. You can think of your database query as a question that you're asking the database. The result of your query is the answer. There are two different types of queries. The first type of query that we're going to talk about today is a single view query. This is probably the simplest type of query because all of the information you want is in a single view, so there is no need to join the data views together. This, however, may not always be possible to get everything you want. In those cases, you may want to use a multi-view query. These can be a little bit more complex because it requires linking the multiple views through some piece of data that exists in both of the database views. Most of the time, we recommend using a GUID. So now you may be asking yourself, what is a GUID? GUID stands for Global Unique Identifier, and this is a term used by Microsoft for a number or a code that is generated to create a unique identity for each record in the database. GUIDs are widely used in the Acctivate database to identify customers, products, sales orders, purchase orders. Practically almost anything and every record in the system has a unique identifier called a GUID. One good thing about the GUIDs is that they do not change. A product GUID will never change even where you change the product ID or the customer ID. The unique GUID identification in the database for that record will always remain the same. This allows Acctivate to maintain the data integrity even when the information that you see on screen is updated. As a general user, you would probably never see a GUID unless you're working with reports or, in this case, Excel queries. So now that we have covered some of the most basic information for what a query is, why might you need or want to use a query, or how to set up the ODBC connection, and a little bit about the database structure, I want to switch over now and do a live demo and walk through the steps together and show you what it would look like on screen as you go through the process. The first thing that we would want to do is set up the ODBC connection. To do this, I'm going to go into the control panel. Now, you'll notice that when the control panel comes up on screen, you may not see all of the different icons. What I usually recommend customers do is View By is usually set to category unless you've changed this in the past. I recommend changing it to large icons or small icons. Then go into the Administrative Tools section. Now you will see the ODBC database source for 32-bit connection. You can either right-click and open or double-click to open the database connection screen. Once you're in this screen, you'll notice it's going to default to the user DSN. The difference between a user DSN and a system DSN is that a system DSN would allow any user that's logged into this machine to access that data source. If you create a user DSN, only the user that created that data source connection would typically be able to access it. I'm going to use a system DSN. However, your IT person may or may not have configured this to allow the system DSN. If you're unable to create a system DSN, it is definitely okay to create a user DSN. The process is exactly the same. So under System DSN, I'm going to click Add, which will open the Create New Data Source window. Because Acctivate is a SQL Server database, I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom, select SQL Server, and click Finish. This is where you want to establish the name and description for your connection. I'm just going to use Acctivate, and then I'm going to use the drop-down to select My Acctivate Database and click Next. Acctivate also is going to require that you use the SQL Server authentication when logging into the SQL Server. So you want to select the radio button for the option that says, with SQL Server authentication, use login ID and password entered by the user. At this point, the login ID is simply SA for System Administrator, and the password you may already have. If you don't and you need that password, please contact our support team. When you click Next, you're going to see the screen that says Create New Data Source for SQL Server, and you're going to see a list of options. I recommend selecting the Change Master Database to your Acctivate database. I'm selecting demo because that is my company. Yours would be Activate $, and typically this would be your company ID or your company name. Click Next. This is also an optional setting, but I typically do change the language of the SQL Server system to be English, and then click Finish. At that point, the connection is established. All you need to do now is test it. So if we test that data source, we get a message that says the test is completed successfully. Now we can close out of all of these windows, and you can now see Activate listed under the system DSN. This is the connection that you just created. Close out of Control Panel, and now we want to go into Microsoft Excel. There are two ways that you can bring the data into Microsoft Excel. As we discussed earlier, you have the option to create the connection through the ODBC Microsoft Query through the wizard or through the Microsoft Query window. I'm going to be representing both scenarios in this demo. So your version of Microsoft Excel may look slightly different. However, you want to go to the Data tab and then click on Get Data from Other Sources and choose from Microsoft Query. This is going to allow you to choose the data source that you just created, called Activate, and when you select that option, it's going to ask you to log into the SQL database. You may want to also expand the options just to confirm that it is still pointed to the correct database. Now, when you see the query wizard, I also typically recommend on this screen to choose the options. Again, as we previously stated, there are tables and views in the Acctivate database. I typically uncheck everything except for views because I know that's what I want to use. I also want to list the tables and the columns in those tables in alphabetical order just to make it easier for me to find the information that I'm looking for. I will also select the owner to be DBO. DBO stands for Database Owner. So that will get me the information that I'll need, and you'll see that now the available tables and columns in the screen have slightly updated. You'll also notice that none of them have the prefix of TB in front of them, so I know these are the views that I want to use. The first example that I want to show you is a simple price export. Maybe you want to update your list prices for all of your products. So I'm going to first find the product price table or product price view. I'm going to expand that view so that I can see all of the information that's inside of it. Because I only want to bring in the product ID, the price code, the price, and the price unit and price type. Those are the only fields that I'm going to select. However, you have the option to choose any of the other fields that you want. The first, I'm going to choose product ID, and then I'm going to use the arrow to move it over to the right hand side. So these will be the columns that in the order in which they appear in the query. I'm then going to choose the price code, the price, the price type, the price unit, and that's going to give me the information that I'm looking for. At this point, we'll just hit Next. So the query wizard also allows you to filter. Because I know that I only want to export the information for my list prices, I'm going to select to filter equals, and I know that the code for list price is the asterisk or the star. So that's what I'm going to filter this data on. I want to sort by product ID. And now at this point you have the option to save the query if it's one that you feel you may use again in the future, or you can simply finish and return the data directly to Excel. Once I click Finish, Microsoft Excel will ask me where I want to put the data. I can select any field on screen, and that's where the table will start. I normally start in A1, but you don't necessarily have to. You also have a Properties button that you can select from here. The properties allow you to select the refresh rate. So one thing that I typically do when I'm generating a Microsoft Excel query is I will set it to refresh every 60 minutes. I will typically also set it to refresh when the file is being opened. And then I may also want to save the password in the file so that each time I open the file, it's not prompting me to re-enter the password. And you can see I now have all of my products directly from your Acctivate database, my price code of star, which I know is the list price, the price type, and the price unit. So if I needed to quickly get all of my prices out of the system so that I could modify these and turn around and re-import them into Acctivate, I could easily do that. You also have the option to select inside of Excel based on the filters just as you would normally in any other Excel document. Now the next option that I'm going to show you is not using the Microsoft Query Wizard. This one is going to actually use the Microsoft Query window itself. So I want to start a new Microsoft Excel, and the process from here is essentially the same. I still click on the Data tab. I then click on Get Data from Other Sources and choose from Microsoft Query. The difference here is that when I choose my data source of Acctivate, I want to uncheck the option to use the Query Wizard to create and edit the queries. This allows me to edit the queries inside of the Microsoft Query Editor as opposed to using the wizard and allowing the wizard to create the information for me. I do still have to log in with the SQL Server password and username. Again, you don't necessarily have to do this, but I almost always expand the options button just to verify that I'm pointed to the correct database, especially for users that may have had this connected to their model company or possibly have more than one Acctivate company file. They may have more Acctivate companies that they want to connect this to. So I want to make sure that I'm pulling the information from the correct one. So this is the Microsoft Query window and the query editor. So the first thing that I want to do once I'm in this query editor is I want to add my tables. And that brings up the window that we just saw. Again, I typically do recommend that you select the owner of DBO, and I also recommend that you check your options to make sure that you're only seeing the views as opposed to the tables. For this example, I want to use the orders view and the orders detail view because I want to show you how you would go about linking two views together through the use of a GUID. So I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to select the orders view and I'm going to click Add, and you can see it appear in the top. And then I'm also going to select the order detail view, and I'm going to add that also to the top. Now at this point I could add additional views if I wanted to, but I'm only going to be pulling information out of these two database views. I can actually expand these a little bit so that I can see them a little better. Now this is where the GUID that we spoke about earlier is going to come into play. The link between the orders view and the order detail view is going to be based off of the GUID order. So I want to grab the GUID order and drag it to the order detail and drop it on the GUID order in the order detail view. This is what links these two together. Now I can begin building my query. From the orders view, which maybe I should explain the difference between orders and order detail for anyone that doesn't understand what that is. The orders view is going to be at the header level. So this is where you would have the order number, the customer information, the total amount paid, any balance possibly that would be on the order, the credit card information, the company information. The order detail view is going to be the product grid. So basically, the orders view will not have any product information in it, and the order detail view will have limited information that is contained in the orders view. So in my scenario that I'm walking through right now, I want both of these. So I'm going to select the order number, the order status, description, and the workflow status and the salesperson name from the orders view. So I'll scroll down and I'll grab the order number and I'll drop it down below, and you can see how it populates the information directly out of Acctivate right into the Microsoft Query Wizard. Now the reason that I chose to use the order status description is because the order status description is essentially the long description of the order status. The order status is essentially the code that Acctivate uses when designating what that is in the database. I don't necessarily want this because I may not know what these codes mean. I'm also going to select the workflow status. And if I wanted to, I could filter this based off of, say, scheduled by clicking in the schedule. I can select the criteria equals. I can select this option to only show me scheduled orders, and it will build that criteria right into the query for me. I'm going to remove that for now so that it shows all of the various order statuses. I'm also going to select my salesperson name. Again, same concept with the order status and order status description. I could add the salesperson ID if that's all I care about, or if I want more the long salesperson name, I can choose salesperson name. In this case, I'm going to remove the salesperson ID, and I'm removing those columns by simply clicking the delete key on my keyboard. Now, because I've linked these two tables together, anything I pull out of the order detail table will relate back to the same order in the orders table. So from the order detail table, I first want to pull the product ID. And it will show me all of the products that were ordered on a specific order. And maybe I want to see more information as far as the quantity that was ordered, the quantity that has been scheduled, the quantity that I've already shipped to the customer, the quantity that is currently on back order, and the total outstanding quantity for that particular order. So I'm going to use the display quantity section. Now the difference here between display quantity and quantity that you see down below is that the display quantity is typically what you see on screen. So I typically recommend, so that customers do not get confused, that they use the display quantity. So the first one that I want to pull down is quantity ordered. Then I want to pull down the quantity scheduled. Then I want to pull down the quantity shipped. the quantity back ordered, and the quantity outstanding. Now, keep in mind that as you're building your queries, it may look a little strange in this window, but once it gets exported to Excel, as you'll see in just a few moments, the information does not have all of these extra zeros, and it's much easier to read. This is because this is coming directly from the Acctivate database. You could add additional columns if you wanted to. For example, if your company uses reference or reference to, or you want to see the origin type, so perhaps if your company has say web store orders, or you want to see something like that where it's coming in from which different web store, you can select to add additional information based on your individual needs. That's what makes the Microsoft query so powerful, in that you don't need to have a customized Crystal report in order to get the information that you want. Now that I have all the information that I've selected in my query, the next thing that I want to do is return it to Excel. To do this, underneath the View button in Microsoft Query, you'll see an icon that I think looks a little bit like a door with an arrow. And if I click that, that is going to then bring me back to Excel, and it's going to ask me where do I want the information. Again, same process as before. I can open the properties. I can select to refresh every 60 minutes. I can also select to refresh the data when the file is opened, and I can also save the password in the file so that I don't have to re-input that password every time I run the report. And now you can see a cleaner version of the query that we just did. Again, it brings us in with our order number, our current order status, our workflow status, the salesperson, the product IDs, the display quantity ordered, the quantity scheduled, the quantity shipped, the quantity back ordered, and the total outstanding quantity for these orders. The ones that I see up at the top now are all completed orders, but let's say that I only want to see my scheduled orders. Most of us are very familiar with how to filter and sort inside of Acctivate, so I'm only going to choose scheduled orders. And you can see how the information changes. Or maybe I only want to see booked orders, and I want to see the quantities that have been ordered on a booked order, or possibly on a quote. You can see how this could be very helpful when you're trying to forecast what you need to order, or what is currently on hand or on back order. So these are the two types of Excel queries that I wanted to show you. Now, if you happen to create the query and you get the information into Excel and you have forgotten to either set the refresh rate or add the password, you can still get back to that piece of information by right-clicking in the table inside of Excel, going to Table, choose External Data Properties, and then from this screen, the External Data Properties screen, if you click the icon for the connection properties, this is where you get back to that connection properties screen to select the refresh rate, and you can either remove these or you can add them back. Same thing with the password. The password is currently being saved, but if I decide that I don't want it to save the password, I can remove that. And then when I save that, it's going to prompt me to input the password again because it's no longer saved in the file. Another option that you have is, let's say once you pull the information out of Acctivate and you've gone through the process of building your Microsoft query and you return the data to Excel. Now, let's say I want to add an additional field. I can still get back to my Microsoft Query window so that I can add additional information. So maybe I want to add, in this case, the total amount for the order. I can see what that amount is for that particular line by adding the amount. Or maybe I don't want to see the amount from the order, but I want to see the line amount. So if we place this over by scheduled, this is going to show us the total scheduled amount for this particular product on this line on this sales order. I don't want to save anything, so I'm just going to cancel that. So if we were to add the order date, and then we wanted to filter on that order date, we could establish a filter. So we could then select the order date as the filter. Now, there may also be an easier way to do this rather than trying to do it in Microsoft the Query Wizard. So again, if I return this back to Excel, what I would probably do is select the date filters once the file is back inside of Excel and choose this week, last week, tomorrow, yesterday, next week. Whatever date range I want to see, I can filter based upon. Now, another question that has come up in the past is, can I rearrange these columns? And the answer to that is yes, you can. I added the order date and the query placed it on the end of the file, but I can still grab and drag it over so that the order date is the first column in the spreadsheet if that's where I want to see it. Sometimes when customers are using a hosted provider such as Right Networks or possibly InSync, they may have that ability locked down where you cannot access the control panel. So in instances like that, you would have to contact them and ask them to set up the data source connection for you in order to use the ODBC connection. Can the changes in Excel be sent back to the Acctivate database? And the answer to that is no. You can think of this information as a view only. So I can see the information, I can even make changes to this information once it's in Excel, but making the changes to the document in the Excel file does not make the changes in the Acctivate database. How do you import the data back into Acctivate? And that's a really good question. Acctivate includes, you may be aware, the data import utility as part of our software, and that's how you would go about importing the information back into Acctivate. So for example, if we were going to update our product price list for our list price, we would simply use the Acctivate import utility to get that back into Acctivate. So again, the Microsoft query is simply just another way that allows our users to pull the information that maybe they want to get out of the system that we don't have a standard report to display in the format that they want to see it. So if we go back to the order export that I did earlier, maybe we only want to see all of the orders that contain product A121. Again, I would probably recommend using the Microsoft Excel filter functionality to pull the information that you want once the information has been exported to Excel. You can try to build some of that stuff into the Microsoft query, but me personally, I find it easier to do in Excel. Once you generate these queries and it's in Excel, if you do want to save that somewhere on the network so that it can be accessed by anyone in the company, as long as it's saved in a shared folder location, you would be able to access that from any machine on the network. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and I hope you learned a lot. I know it was very basic for those of you that are more power users of Acctivate and Excel, but I wanted to just give a brief overview to those who may not even be aware that this was a possibility.